Scott McGowan, Carrie Huffman, Melanie Voigt, Joanne. There we go. Lucilla Covington and Frank Covington. You may have to. I almost misread it again this time. We're going to have a handwriting lesson here. How are you?
Fine.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Scott McCowan. I'm a retired state district judge who heard a lot of CPS cases. I'm currently the director of the Children's Rights Clinic representing children in CPS cases at the UT Law School, and I'm an adoptive parent, which may be the most educational thing I've done. I want to make 2, maybe 3 points in my brief time. First, yesterday you focused a lot on turnover, and that's exactly the key issue. And the Sunset Commission's come up with some great recommendations. I have no quarrel with them. And I know you're not a budget group, but I want to emphasize that salary has a big role to play here. Our public school teachers' average salary is $48,375. They have 7.7 years average tenure. Our CPS caseworkers' average salary is $37,000, $10,000 less, and their average tenure is 3.2 years. It's not that big a fix to think about a significant salary increase. For 5,000 caseworkers, it would be a $50 million increase, and it is the biggest issue identified by Sunset and I think identified by a lot of witnesses today. I also want to offer a revenue-neutral idea that you could call for, which would be a pilot program to do something completely different, which is instead of increasing salaries, reduce qualifications. Have several units that are staffed not by college graduates, but by community college graduates. And I think about Senator Birdwell and his experience and Senator Hinojosa's experience. We send 18, 19, 20-year-olds over to fight battles under the command of sergeants and lieutenants with more education and training. If we are not going to be able to pay what it takes to attract the level of workforce that we would desire, maybe we would be better off with a more stable, less educated workforce. Second point, foster care redesign, its supporters, its opponents all agree it's not revenue neutral. If we're going to move forward on foster care redesign, it's going to require additional funding to be effective. And I strongly agree with Sunset that any go, no-go decision needs to wait until we have performance data and financial data. And before we move forward with any additional regions, we need to make sure the projects we've launched, one a for-profit but one a non-profit, are both successful, and learn from those experiences. It's not revenue neutral. We need rate increases to make that system go. And so those are the 2 points I wanted to make. I'll be happy to answer any questions about them or other issues if you have them.
Interesting. And that wasn't a Sunset recommendation, obviously. I'm sorry, the decreased education requirement.
No, and it would be a recommendation that many in the field would be horrified at, but it is revenue neutral. And let me say, what's the advantage of having a more educated but completely unstable workforce? And our reductions in turnover, I think, are mostly the product of the Great Recession. And as the economy improves, we're going to see turnover get worse. Right before the recession, when the economy was strong, our turnover was 40%. If we cannot pay what it takes to attract these college-educated graduates who, if they enjoy children and have a college education, can go be school teachers for $10,000 a year more. If we can't pay that, maybe we need to design units that are staffed with community college graduates, get our community colleges to offer associate degrees in social work and produce in 18 months a workforce for us that then is supported by that strong sergeant and by that strong lieutenant with more advanced training and education. And that might be a more stable, though less educated workforce. I think a pilot project along that line would be something that could be done.
Did you read that Stevens report?
Yes, I did. And
wow.
It was a very good report. But again, what I want to emphasize is that you can make all those management changes, but the fundamental nature of this job, which is always going to be a pretty big caseload, even if we do the best we can, working with very troubled families in sometimes dangerous settings and trying to help children, that is a hard job. And we pay on average, that's across all caseworkers, $37,000 a year. We've either got to get that up by $10,000 to $15,000 a caseworker, or we have to think about how do we redesign this with maybe a less educated but more stable workforce.
Interesting.
Sorry,
Representative Dutton
turn it
and
off.
then
Yeah.
Senator.
Judge, I'm not sure how to respond to your suggestion, but let me ask this. Do you know of anywhere where a model like that worked?
Nobody's tried this. And
I mean, not just in that industry, but any industry, for example.
well, think about the Army. We take 18, 19, 20-year-olds with high school educations. We give them strong training. We put a strong, highly experienced sergeant in it with a short span of control and a college-educated lieutenant, and we equip them with heavy weapons and ask them to do incredibly difficult assignments, and they're successful.
But we don't let them make certain critical decisions. I mean, they're more, and in this case, it seems to me that the sort of decisions that are going to have to be made by these folks or life and death kind of decisions, not for them necessarily, but for the people they're dealing with.
Well, I think our units, our platoons, make pretty significant decisions on the ground. But I would also say that I'm not talking about taking community college graduates and turning them loose. I mean, I'm talking about a short span of control with a highly trained supervisor with, the more education and credentials that you're pointing out. And I'm also not suggesting that we just do it. I'm suggesting that you call for a pilot. If you did it in a region with some significant number of units, your concern could be tested. We could see if they could do it. We could see if we had more stability. But we've either got to lower our qualifications so that we can hire people who will stick with us for what we're willing and able to pay, or we've got to up the pay. And I'm happy to go the other direction and increase salaries by $10,000 or $15,000. But I guess the point I want to emphasize that I thought got lost yesterday is that we can do everything that the Sunsets recommended. We can do everything Stevens has recommended. We're still going to have very high turnover. And in order to reduce that turnover, we've got to do something significant in one of these two directions.
Well, how do you look at that in light of what we just heard a moment ago about the culture of this organization? I mean, it seems to me that if you now...
So...
Well, I'm not
That's
sure.
a great question. That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it because it gives me an opportunity to say something from the heart, which is it's brutal today to hear these individual stories, and I would hate to be in your position responsible for responding to them. But I want to point out a couple of things. Number one, by definition, these stories are in the past. You have had a tremendous reform effort led by Chairman Nelson since 2005, where you've increased money, you've made reforms, and I can show you the data. One was that you called out yourself, Representative Dutton, yesterday. We've dramatically increased the use of relatives. We have dramatically, this is a story that hadn't been told, but thanks to what Chairman Nelson and others done, we've reduced the use of psychotropic medications by 30%. And we have reduced the polypharmacy, both medicines in the same class and the number of medicines. We're probably a national leader now in psychotropic medication. So I work in this system every day, and I don't want to deny anybody their reality because Lord knows there are a lot of problems in this system. But I will tell you it also does a tremendous amount of good, that we have many wonderful foster parents. And if you want to hear from youth, you yourselves have mandated an annual youth survey. Pull the annual youth survey for the last 5 years and read what the youth tell in response to the survey you've asked the heartwarming stories of how CPS saved their lives. And so it is a brutal day, and all of these are individual realities, but they're not necessarily a system reality.
Well, and I know this system, as you well know, we're not going to get a lot of the folks coming here who have great things to say about CPS, for example. I mean, the
You never hear from your happy constituents.
That's right. But however, given that, though, one of the things that always concerned me, that frightened me more than what I know, is what I didn't know, and what we don't know about this, and whether or not there's something below the radar that we still have not begun to address.
Can you give me an example of a
Well,
concern?
I'm just thinking about when you start talking about the culture of an organization would tend to suppress, as you well know, the kinds of information coming forth that we as policymakers would necessarily have. And so I'm not sure whether the people coming and saying these things are the exception or the rule.
So I think in part they're the past, because we've had tremendous reform efforts since 2005. In part they're the exception. But I don't want to say we don't have problems in this system. But it's not that we don't know what those problems are. This is a very open system. You've got district judges, you've got CASAs, you've got all sorts of multidisciplinary people, child advocates. We know what the issues are in this system. And then the other thing I would say, because I'm very frustrated about this term culture, systems produce cultures. And if you could lower caseloads, if you could cut turnover, then what a lot of people identify as cultural issues are in fact the product of an underfunded, overwhelmed system. And if you could reduce those caseloads and if you could stabilize your workforce, then a lot of the serious problems that you've heard about today would be reduced.
Well, and I guess yet, in light of your conclusion, or suggestion rather, about lowering the quality of the people.
Not the quality of the people, the educational qualifications. I think that's an important distinction.
Well, I'm not sure how to disaggregate them from each other, though, because if you're going to take lower the educational level, then education should stand for something. If it doesn't do any more than suggest that the quality is going to be better.
So here's what I'm saying. Right now you take 4-year degrees in art history or English, you put them through a training program and you send them in. I'm saying to you, if you chartered a group of your community colleges to produce associates in social work, a 2-year program to a social work degree, people who would then work in CPS and would be happy at $37,000 a year with health care and retirement, I'm not so sure we couldn't get a better workforce. Now, I don't know that we could. You could be right, and that's the danger.
No, I don't know if I'm right.
I don't know if I'm right. But what I'm saying is, let's have y'all call for a pilot program. Let's do it in a region or two and try it out. Let's get 1 or 2 of our community colleges committed to the program and give it a whirl, because one of the things that struck me about the Sunset Report, they said, here's a report about turnover from when Sam Houston was governor. Here's a report from when Dolph Briscoe was governor. We have been talking about this problem over and over and over, and we've got to do something. It is the critical problem.
Well, okay. I understand.
I hear you, and I'm not saying you're wrong.
I understand.
I'm saying it's worth an effort.
I just don't want to take the dive and find out there's no water in the pool afterwards.
Well, and if you want to fill the pool with $50 million for 10,000 across the board raises, I'd support that.
All right. Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Judge.
Senator Hinojosa?
You know, actually, I agree with you. I don't think there's a difference between educated and being intelligent.
Exactly.
Okay,
And
someone
trained.
someone that have an education, not very intelligent. Okay, someone is very intelligent but not have an education. And I don't think there's any lower in terms of quality applicants just because you design a program where you have people who are actually trained at community college with a social degree to focus and are motivated to do this type of work. Because what I see in some of the CPS or Child Protective Service workers that I've seen, some are very motivated, very smart, good judgment. Some are not. And to me, it's part of the process is how do you identify those people that you fit the mold of what you're trying to, that will fit the job description. And also, if you look at the military, whether it's in Vietnam, Afghanistan, usually it's 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds who are doing very complicated maneuvers. And then you look at some of the assembly lines, some of the work is done operating some of the robots. It's also people who don't have a BA degree or don't have a master's. Sometimes we overvalue a degree, a college degree, as compared to what the skills that are needed to perform certain
Well,
jobs.
and this is no different than what we're doing in medicine or other fields where we're using increasingly paraprofessionals. And I think it's worth a pilot project and working with the community college to try to do it. But let me point out one other thing real quick, because I think it's a misstatement or a misunderstanding. These private providers in foster care redesign, they're not going to be able to pay their workforce any better. I mean, when you take the state health insurance and state retirement and $37,000 a year, they're not going to be able to increase what they pay their workforce on what we pay for foster care redesign. So this workforce issue is not going to go away. And the reason it's the number one issue in Sunset is because it's the number one issue.
Yeah.
And to one more point, one of the things also to change culture, you can't do that overnight. But certainly you have to continue pushing. And I use TYC as an example. When we reformed the Texas Youth Commission, I think in 2007, we wrote great legislation, we did great reforms, but I guess the reality was that we couldn't quite implement and get them to do what we asked them to do in legislation. So we finally pretty much did away with them and merged them into a juvenile division, but it is an issue.
It is an issue. I would point out, you can look at some specific areas the department has performed. You wanted increased use of relatives, the department performed amazingly. You heard the statistics yesterday. You wanted a reduction in psychotropic medication, the department performed. I think we're probably a national model. And so there has been improvement. And I think what people are, when they say cultural issues, I think what they're primarily talking about is an underfunded, overwhelmed workforce. And to the extent that we can address that, we can address many of these other issues. Right now is an amazing time with Executive Commissioner Janik and Commissioner Specia. You have the kind of leadership that you just haven't had in my time working with this group. And it's a good time to invest and see if you can make some progress.
One more point, and that is that we really, the other, what I see a key element in a structure are your managers, mid-level managers that are in constant contact and supervision are your frontline employees that are working on these different, very difficult, stressful cases.
That's right. You have to have a small span of control and a highly trained and motivated supervisor.
And that's pretty inconsistent from what I see with Child Protective Service.
Our span of control has been growing, and we need to get it in the other direction.
Thank you.
Representative Raymond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things real quick, Judge. I think one is it's an interesting idea. I think, however, when you say, I think the solution to this problem is pay people less and pay people with less education less. It just doesn't sound right, right? So you got to rethink how you say it. Number one, as what came to my mind as I listened to you discuss it, is, for example, RNs and LVNs. In my community, in Laredo, for example, at the community college, we have a very good LVN program, and that's really helped. And you have some very good LVNs that couldn't go to the RNs, right? Some of them go on, many do not. but that has meant a lot to our community and our hospitals and our clinics, etc. And so you've got me thinking that that model it should be something we look at, but I don't think we're going to sell it by telling our colleagues, look, let's pay people with less education.
Well, maybe we should use the metaphor of physicians and nurse practitioners.
Something
I'm
along those
saying,
lines.
though, that we have to staff with a different level of professionals.
I hear you, and what I'm telling you is that you've certainly got me thinking, but initially, just the way you presented it, you're going to get pushback because it doesn't sound right.
I'll take that critique. That's a good one, and I'll work on my metaphors.
But I'm serious. I mean, I thought RNs and LVNs, and I'm happy with what we're doing with LVNs, for example.
Representative Dutton.
I don't want to belabor this point, but we do that within a defined curriculum or within a defined set of choices that this person can make and engage in at that job. When you talk about LVNs and RNs, there's certain things LVNs cannot do that RNs can do.
I think that's an excellent observation.
And so maybe what we ought to do is look at the job we're requiring these people to do and then make the determination as to whether or not that can be taken apart such that you can have people who have a lesser education requirement perform that task.
I think that's
what
right.
I mean, simply to blanket it, because what causes me a little bit of heartburn, Judge, is nobody's come up here and said this high turnover, where do these people go?
Well, many of them go to be public school teachers. They can make $10,000 more a year and cut their workload and stress. Even as stressful as public school teaching is, you can cut your workload and stress dramatically and increase your pay.
Do we have a survey or something that indicates that?
We do. In fact, the legislature required CPS to do a salary study. It was done and completed and delivered to you in December of 2012. I cite it in my comments to the Sunset staff. It's on the DFPS website, and it documents in detail what the salary issues are, and it's gotten practically no attention.
Does it say where the people who
Yes.
leave go?
Yes.
Okay. Because that would ultimately indicate that's who this particular job is competing with.
Yes.
And to the extent that that's who you're competing with, I mean, I assume that means now we're going to be competing somewhere else in this whole employment chain, and are you simply now changing one problem for another problem?
I don't think so. I think you might be opening up a new opportunity for people. And let me point out on this education issue, Representative Dutton, if your community colleges were developing an associate's degree in social work designed to produce this workforce for you, just like they produce workforces for Toyota, you might actually have a better educated person, not in the sense of a 4-year degree, but in the sense of much more specific training for the job that you're asking them to do. I think it's worth a pilot, but I also think the $50 million is a good alternative.
It's a good pilot, isn't it?
But you got to do something.
All
The
right,
Stevens report and the Sunset
Yes.
report aren't going to do it alone.
Yeah, thanks, Judge. Thank you.
Great food for thought. We always appreciate your input, and we appreciate your kind comments. I mean, I was thinking after we heard those heartbreaking stories, we forget sometimes to remind ourselves what great people we have out there on the front line.
Well, if you go
Fabulous.
read those youth surveys, I think your heart will be warmed by
I'm-
what some of the youth say about their
suggestion.
experience who aren't here.
Good suggestion. I need that right now. Thank you. Let's see.